My name is Dennis Calloway, and I was 64 years old the afternoon my mother told me I had already been compensated enough. She said it in the living room of the house I grew up in on Lewiston Avenue in Boardman, Ohio, while my brother sat beside her on the couch. The room smelled the same way it always had. Old carpet and her particular brand of hand lotion, and the faint machine oil smell that had lived in the walls since my father ran the hardware store out of the garage 35 years ago. The afternoon light was flat and gray through the curtains. I sat in the chair across from them and kept my hands in my lap. What none of them knew was what I had already decided to do the moment I heard her say it. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge, where quiet patience always outlasts loud cruelty. If you've ever given everything and got nothing back, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My father, Earl, started Calloway Hardware and Supply in 1979 and converted two-car garage on the south side of Boardman. He was 41 years old, a former machine shop foreman with $8,000 in savings, and a particular genius for knowing what people needed before they knew to ask for it. He sold fasteners and pipe fittings and replacement parts for appliances that the big stores had stopped carrying. He kept a card file of every customer who had ever bought something unusual, so he could call them when he found another one. He was not a businessman in any formal sense. He was a man who understood that loyalty was built one remembered detail at a time. I understood that too. I am his son. My name is Dennis Calloway. I spent 22 years as a shift supervisor at Harmon Paper Mill on Youngstown Road, working a schedule that started at 5:30 a.m. 3 weeks out of 4 and ended whenever the line was clean. I was not the kind of man who accumulated things. I had a house on Boardman-Poland Road, the one Ruth and I bought in 1989 for $74,000 and paid off in 2008. I had a truck with 190,000 miles on it. I had a pension from the mill and a savings account I had been adding to since I was 26. And I had a wife named Ruth who died 8 years ago of a stroke on a Tuesday morning in February while I was at the grocery store. She was 53 years old. She was standing at the kitchen sink when it happened. I came home and found her. I tell you that so you understand the kind of loss a man carries quietly while continuing to show up. My brother Gary is 5 years younger than me. He stayed in Boardman after high school, worked in my father's store through his 20s and 30s, and built his identity around being the one who was present. He married a woman named Diane in 1995. They had 2 daughters. Gary had the kind of life you could see. Dinners with my parents on Sundays, a truck in the hardware store parking lot, a name on the schedule. My life looked different from the outside. I worked shifts. I sent money. I showed up when the calendar allowed and stayed longer than I was expected to. From 1994 to 2007, I sent my parents $800 a month, not because they asked, because I looked at my father's books in August of 1993. He had called me because the numbers weren't making sense, and I understood that the store was covering its costs but not building any cushion. The $800 was my calculation of what the cushion should be. My father accepted it without comment. My mother thanked me once. Gary never mentioned it. I kept the wire transfer records in a folder in my filing cabinet on Boardman-Poland Road. In 2003, the roof on the Calloway Hardware building needed replacing. My father got one estimate, $18,400, and called me on a Wednesday evening to tell me the store might not be able to carry it. I told him I would handle it. I called the roofing company the next morning, paid by check, and drove out to Boardman the following Saturday to make sure the work was done right. The whole thing took 11 days from call to completion. Gary was out of town that weekend. He sent a text when he got back saying the roof looked good. For 9 months, from February through October 2009, I drove Ruth to chemotherapy at St. Elizabeth's every Tuesday and Thursday without missing a shift at the mill. I arranged my schedule around her appointments, traded days with a man named Kovacs who owed me a favor, and drove her home with the heat on high because the treatments left her cold even in July. She lost her hair in March. She got it back in November, thinner than before. She made it 4 more years after that. I am grateful for every one of them. There's a green metal filing box that my father kept on the bottom shelf of the closet in his home office. It is a kind of box with a latch on the front and a handle on the top, Military surplus green, the paint chipped at the corners. I had seen it my entire life. My father called it the real file, meaning the copy of everything that mattered, kept separate from whatever was in the store's official records. I knew what was in it. I had been there when one of the documents was created. In October of 1987, my father asked me to help him formalize the business structure. He had been approached by a property developer who wanted to lease the space next door, and the developer's attorney needed a proper entity document before they could proceed. My father did not have an attorney at the time. I found one, a man named Rutherford on Market Street who handled small business matters, and I drove my father to his office on a Thursday afternoon. We sat at a small table. My father explained what he needed. Rutherford typed a founding partnership agreement. It listed Earl Calloway and Dennis Calloway as equal co-founders of Calloway Hardware and Supply. My father signed it. I signed it. Rutherford notarized it on October 14th, 1987. My father put the original in the green metal box. He gave me a copy, which I kept in my own filing cabinet. The developer deal fell through 6 weeks later, and the document was never filed anywhere or formalized further. Gary was 23 at the time and had nothing to do with the business yet. I never mentioned it again, not because I was waiting to use it, because it had simply never come up, and I did not conduct my life by announcing what I was owed. The family meeting was called for November 12th. My parents' attorney, Gerald Watts, had been handling their estate planning since 1991, and he had sent a letter in October suggesting a family conversation about asset distribution. My parents were in their mid-80s. The conversation had been coming for a long time. I drove to Lewiston Avenue that morning and arrived at 11:47 a.m. Gary's truck was already in the driveway. Diane was in the kitchen. My parents were at the dining room table with a folder in front of them. Gerald Watts was not present. The meeting, I understood on arrival, was not a formal estate proceeding. It was a family conversation. My parents had already made their decisions. This was the announcement. My mother, Norma, had a way of beginning difficult conversations by framing them as settled facts. She did not ask. She explained. Your father and I have decided to give Gary $214,000 from the business accounts, she said. We're calling it equalizing the family. Gary has put in the time here. He's been present. My stomach dropped. I kept my face still. She folded her hands on the table. Dennis, you've had a good life. You have your pension. Gary has a family to support and the business to think about. We think this is what's fair. I said nothing. Gary was sitting to her left. He did not look at me directly. He had a particular way of holding himself when he knew something was uncomfortable. Very upright, chin slightly raised, as if the posture itself was a form of innocence. My father was at the end of the table. He was looking at his hands. My mother continued. You've been compensated already, Dennis, in different ways. The roof, the money you sent, we've always appreciated that. But that was your choice. This is different. This is the business. The word compensated landed somewhere behind my sternum, and something there folded in on itself. I nodded once. Is there anything you want to say? My mother asked. I looked at my father. He did not look up. I said, No. Gary exhaled. Not loudly, just a small release of breath. That meant he had been holding it. I heard it anyway. I drove 4 hours every Thanksgiving for 11 years to help my father stock the shelf before the holiday rush, arriving Thursday evening, staying through Friday, driving back Saturday morning. I co-signed Gary's first truck note in 2001 when his credit wouldn't clear. I paid $9,200 of my mother's 2011 hospital bill, the portion that was Gary's share, without telling anyone it had been divided. When Gary let the hardware store's insurance lapse in 2015, I paid the $3,100 reinstatement fee the same afternoon I found out, because the alternative was the store operating uncovered and my father not knowing. Gary paid me back in installments. He was done by 2018. I thought about all of it on the drive home. My dashboard clock read 2:47 p.m. when I pulled into my own driveway on Boardman-Poland Road. I sat in the car for 9 minutes with the engine off. The heat ticked out the vents. The yard was bare. A cardinal landed on the fence post by the garage and stayed there for a moment, and then it left. I got out of the car. I went inside. I made coffee. I stood in the kitchen and drank it. Then I went to my filing cabinet in the back room and pulled out a folder I had not opened in years. I already knew what was in it. I had always known what was in it. I was simply at this particular moment ready. The copy of the 1987 partnership agreement was exactly where I had put it. 2 pages typewritten, signed and notarized. Dennis Calloway. Earl Calloway. October 14th, 1987. I read it once. I put it back in the folder. I went to bed. The next morning I called Victor Ashby. Victor was an estate and probate attorney in Youngstown, a man I had found through a referral from a colleague at the mill 12 years earlier and consulted once about Ruth's estate. He was thorough and unhurried, which were the qualities I valued. I reached him at 9:03 a.m. I told him I had a document I needed him to review and that I needed to understand what it meant in the context of a business that had operated under a different assumption for 37 years. He asked me to bring it in. The Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I drove to his office on Mahoning Avenue in Youngstown. I left Boardman-Poland Road at 7:14 a.m. Before I went to Victor's office, I stopped at the Mahoning County Document Authentication Office, where a record specialist named Carol Stemple examined the 1987 notarization seal and confirmed at 11:32 a.m. that the document was authentic, had never been superseded, and had no record of being filed, transferred, or dissolved. Victor reviewed it that afternoon. He called me at 3:47 p.m. "Dennis," he said, "this is a valid founding partnership agreement. It was never dissolved, never bought out, never formally amended. As of the date on this document, you are a co-founder of Calloway Hardware and Supply with equal standing. The fact that it was never filed doesn't extinguish it. It means nobody looked." My throat went dry. I held the phone steady. "What does that mean practically?" I said. He told me. That evening, I went back to my parents' house. I asked my father if I could look in his filing box. He was in the living room watching the news. He looked at me for a moment, really looked at me, in the way he had not done at the family meeting, and said, "Bottom shelf of the closet." I went into his office. I found the green metal box. I opened the latch. The original was still there, typed on the same paper, same signatures, same notary seal. October 14th, 1987. Earl Calloway. Dennis Calloway. My hands were very still. I photographed every page. I put it back. I closed the latch. I drove home. Victor filed a formal claim notice with Gerald Watts' office on December 2nd, citing the 1987 agreement and requesting a full accounting of the business assets and the $214,000 disbursement. Gary's attorney, a man named Paul Sieber from an office in Canfield, called me at 6:31 p.m. the same day. "Mr. Calloway," he said, "we'd like to discuss a resolution before this goes any further." I said I would have Victor respond. Gary called me the following Saturday at 4:09 p.m. I could hear Diane in the background. His voice had the quality of a man who had been rehearsing what he was going to say and had decided at the last moment not to say any of it. "I didn't know about the document," he said. I believed him. That was the truth of it. Gary hadn't known. Nobody had hidden it from him. It had simply been in a green metal box on a bottom shelf, waiting the way things wait when nobody thinks to ask. "I know," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want, Dennis?" I thought about that question for a long time before I answered. The meeting at Gerald Watts' office was set for December 9th. Victor and I arrived at 8:22 a.m. Gary and Paul Siebert were already in the conference room. My parents were not present. Gerald had advised against it, and for once I agreed with him. At 10:04 a.m., Victor placed a certified copy of the 1987 partnership agreement on the conference table. A second copy went to Gerald Watts. A third copy went to Paul Siebert. I paused. The room was quiet in the way rooms get quiet when the weight of something shifts. Gary's face went pale in a way that starts at the forehead and moves downward. He looked at the signature. He looked at mine. He looked at his attorney. Paul Siebert read the document without speaking. He turned the first page. He turned the second. He set it down. "This appears to be a valid notarized agreement," he said. Victor said, "It is." Gerald Watts looked at me for a long moment. He had known our family since 1991. He looked like a man who was doing arithmetic in his head about what he had not thought to ask. I did not say anything to Gary about the Thanksgiving drives. I did not say anything about the roof, or the insurance, or the hospital bill, or the 13 years of $800 transfers that had kept a cushion under a business I was legally half entitled to. I sat in that chair with my hands on the table and let the document speak. That is the only kind of speech that costs nothing and means everything. The resolution took 6 weeks. On January 21st, Gary and I signed a formal equity acknowledgement prepared by Victor and Gerald jointly. The $214,000 disbursement was restructured as a partial advance against Gary's future share. A formal valuation of Calloway hardware and supply was commissioned. My position as co-founder was entered into the business record. My father signed the amended documents on January 24th at 2:15 in the afternoon at his kitchen table on Lewiston Avenue. His hand was steady. He did not say much when it was done. He looked at me with the same expression he had worn at that family meeting, the one where he had looked at his hands instead of at me, and something in it had changed. Not everything, but something. My mother called me the first Sunday in February. She said she thought the process had been hard on everyone. I told her I agreed. She said she hoped things could settle. I told her I hoped so too. Gary and I have not had a long conversation since December. We are not enemies. We are two men who understand each other differently now, which is not the worst thing a family can arrive at. I drive past a hardware store on Tuesdays sometimes, the route I used to take when I was going to help my father with the books. The sign is the same sign he put up in 1979. The parking lot needs repaving. Gary has been meaning to do it for 3 years. Dennis Calloway, 64 years old and a co-founder of Record. Some inheritances are paper. Some are silence, and some are the name that was always on the document, just waiting for someone to open the right box. If your name was on that table, and your parents said the matter was already settled, and then a 37-year-old document showed up, what would you have done with it? Tell me in the comments. And if you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.